All right, so we just finished putting our black and white cutout vector as a smart object into Photoshop and then adding layer style attributes to colorize and texture it. And that is my preferred professional way of doing color versions of logos. Right? It does a lot of your work for you, and it allows you to be to see different options without having to know what you want ahead of time. So let me go ahead and save that. But let's pretend you didn't have Photoshop to assign these layer effects. So let's go back to Illustrator. And let's open up that last AI file. Here it is. Oh, it's PSD. Where is it? I think it's this one. All right. Sure enough, there it is. So, how can I add color within Illustrator? Well, one way is you can add color around and behind your cutout. So I'm going to make a new layer and then drop it behind the layer I'm actually using. And I can draw a shape. So let's say I want maybe like a blue sky shape, kind of soft and dynamic, cloud-like. Nice and smooth. And then I'm going to fill that with a light blue. I still like to use only web colors, so you don't have to, because it requires you to make pretty strong decisions. Okay, and then you can see I can put that behind my logo. That's one way of adding color. But there are more ways than just doing a fill that could be interesting. And if I move that down a little bit, if I use the large selection tool, I can squeeze it, like transforming. I can rotate it. And if I lock my logo layer, I can redraw it. So if I wanted that white space to kind of encompass the E for a later text solution, I can do that. Right? That's kind of nice. Or if I want the white highlight on the trunk not to be blue, I have to cut around the blue. You see? So it's all about layering up pieces of paper, basically, to get these effects to happen. And if I want there to be white inside the trunk, I can cut out a new shape, a new path, fill that with white. And so without it, it looks like this. Without the logo on top, that's a blue cutout of paper, that's a white cutout of paper on top of the blue cutout of paper, and here's my black cutout on top of that. And that's what it looks like. Okay? So I might do that again for within the leaf here. So I think of it like stained glass. You're just layering colored shapes on top of each other and making sure they do what you need them to do. And it gets a little bit more complicated because we're not only trying to do black and white anymore. Huh, why is it? Let me save this quick. It's sticking me on a tool I don't want to be on. I'm not sure why. Huh. Save. Close. And try reopening it. All right, still. Okay, Illustrator is doing something very odd right now. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the only two layers I need, select them both, copy them, so edit, copy. Then I'm going to open a new file, a new Illustrator file. Carl, assignment 6, color alternatives, logo, as a print file. And then I'm going to paste those in place. There we go. Now I've got my tools back. So I'm not sure why Illustrator was sticking me on the hand tool. But here I have those options. And I might think that looks pretty good. But I want to make sure I separate out those different layers from each other so I can organize them. And so basically it's all of these, it's just that the black layer is on top. That gives me the illusion. But here are the options I have. What if I take that blue layer and instead of it being solid blue, let's copy it, paste it in place, and turn off the one underneath. Instead of it being a solid blue, why don't we fill it with a gradient? And I can do that under these gradient options, which you can find in Window under Gradient. And I can say I want a linear gradient, I want a fading sky gradient, that would be appropriate, right? Or I want an orange-yellow gradient. But of course, I can make these gradients anything I want. I can select the colors. I kind of like it. It looks like fall. And I can also, and this is the really cool thing about gradients in Illustrator, I can also set the opacity of them. So I can have it fade out to no opacity at a few different spots. Maybe at this end I have it fade out to 0% opacity. And here maybe I have it fade to like 30% opacity. And here I'll have it fade to 70% opacity. And then the yellow, I'm going to start at maybe 20% opacity, bring that in a little bit. And then I can set the angle. So a lot of those same options are there as were there in Photoshop layer styles, but they're just different ways of working with them. Okay, and then I want to bring those white layers up on top again in the leaf and on the tree branch. And now that's a way I can add color. Now let me bring it all over onto the gray so you can see what that means with opacity versus the white. So that means it would look like this on a gray background. That looks kind of stylish, right? Looks a little watercolory. This is it on a white background. Whoops. Have to select everything. But what if I actually want to color within the logo itself? Well, of course I can change the color of the logo. I can change it from being black to being something else. So I want these background white colors to be, yeah, in that layer so I can lock them. So I can change all of these colors to be a green or a blue or anything else I want. I can fill them with a gradient. If I want it to be really watercolor, I can do a fading gradient and I can change that color. And I can have this be like a green with a lot of black in it. And I can play with the opacity, not let it ever fade out completely. Have it go from green to blue. That looks kind of nice. I can add a stroke to it, and I can make that stroke a color, just like I could with layer styles in Photoshop. But unlike layer styles in Photoshop, I can make my stroke something other than just the usual solid line. I can make it taper from thick to thin. I can make it wavy. Or some of my favorites, I can make it look hand-drawn using that. Or I can even make it calligraphic, like it's done with an angled brush. But let's try this charcoal one, which is still a vector. It's kind of hard to get your head around, but it's a vector that's made to look like it's hand-drawn. It's a vector stroke. So that looks kind of funky and cool, but maybe the color's not quite right. I still like to play with web colors. Oops, I have to select it first. And maybe I actually want it to be white. I've got to select it first. So there's lots of things you can try. And then the last thing I can show you, yeah, that's pretty nice. Let's see what that looks like on the gray background. I want everything, so let me unlock it. Move it over. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Though I don't love what the charcoal stroke does inside the leaf. That looks a little sloppy, but it's showing you all of these different options you have. Okay, now, how do I add color on top of the logo? I've done it behind, I've done it in the logo shape itself. What if I wanted to add some color accents in here? Well, then I'll lock these layers. I'll make a layer on top. I'll start it with just a regular fill so I can see what I'm doing. Now let's say I want a shape like this. You know, I want to fill in the stump with color. If I get to have my color version. Let's make this a little less smooth, more accurate. And add kind of color plates on top of everything. It's easy to overdo it. And I'm going to turn off the stroke for these. It has a thin white stroke I don't want. All right. Now I can play with the opacity of those. We haven't done that yet. So we've played with the gradation. But now just with those colors on top, I'm going to go to gradient. There it is. And instead of using gradient to mess with them, which we've played with, I'm going to play with opacity. And I'm just going to take their opacity down. And it will let the background come through. So you'll see where all of these different low opacity layers come together, you get slightly different shapes, slightly different effects happening. I can keep it at a low opacity and put a gradient in. It's a little annoying how I have to choose my own colors this way. And it will keep that opacity, but I can change the angle and change the individual gradation opacities as I see fit. Now the one way that Illustrator is limited